1988, I had spent a couple of years getting approval, which is very hard to do. I'm in what they call the Adirondack Parkade, 6 million acres of land, half owned privately, half owned publicly, and very difficult to develop any of that land. But I wanted to develop part of my land into an 8-lot subdivision. And it took me 2 years, a lot of money to get through, but finally got it approved. And along the way, I had gone to the town of Queensbury and gotten a permit. And in 1988, when this subdivision included a small access road off a town highway to serve the 8 lots that I had developed and was planning to sell. And the day that the trucks arrived with the road building material, I have a 13-foot-long driveway, and this vehicle was racing up the driveway and came up to the house and opened the screen door on the porch, and he dropped a piece of paper on the deck. Didn't ring the bell, and took off. The kids brought it in. It was a stop work order from the town of Queensbury. The town of Queensbury was the lead defendant in the case that we had won a few years earlier. And I suspected that maybe this is retribution. So I went to see the town supervisor, and just his body language confirmed for me that this is what this was. They didn't like me because I had questioned them, and I should tell you that after we won that lawsuit against the town of Queensbury on the sewer project, EPA funded a very large, very expensive environmental review of that project and concluded the last thing you want to do is add sewers around Lake George. So we were right to question them. But in any event, the power base there didn't like this, and so they issued a stop work order on my subdivision saying that this little town road we were tying into was unsafe for these extra people who were going to be traveling on the road. So I determined that I'd spent about $50,000 of my money on the first case, and that I was going to, I needed to find out what this highway law was all about, what my rights were to tie into a town road. And so I went to the law library, and as engineers do, you start at the beginning. So I studied the highway law from King George on down. And it was a great history lesson. But I learned what my rights were. And I learned that if the road is unsafe, as long as it's not a hidden driveway, and you got line of sight on both sides, if they felt that the road was too narrow, tough, they've got to widen it, and the law gives them, the town, the authority to widen it to 3 rods. I had forgotten what a rod was, how long a rod was, so when I was reading this this law. And so in this law library, the state law library down the museum building in Albany, they had a pedestal, and on it was this huge dictionary. So I went over there, I'm reading, looking for what the definition of a rod, and when I read it, I sort of let out this big wow, and everybody looked up for this, doing all their research. I shouldn't have yelled out, but I was excited because a rod is 16 feet, and the town was given the authority to widen the road to 48 feet. So what's the problem here? You're not going to keep me off of public utility when you've got the authority to make it safe. So that was my argument. And I put the papers together and argued the case and prevailed. They brought it to the appellate, the next level, and they lost. And I was able to go ahead and support myself during my second career. This is really what I wanted to do. I wanted to do more of what I do now full time, but how am I going to support myself? Well, I've got this land. Whenever I need money, I'll sell another building lot. And so I sued the town and prevailed in Schulz v. Town of Queensbury. And that was the beginning of a lot more of that work. I was doing more and more of it, and in 1990, things took a big turn. There was a question in our state constitution: the state can't borrow money unless the voters approve. So the legislature had twice passed, and it was going on the ballot in November, the state asking the voters to approve their borrowing $1.9 billion. And the word was, it was really for environmental programs, but it was really to balance the budget. They tell you that. But anyway, so I was at home and I received an envelope, and as all homeowners were receiving all across the state. And in the envelope was from the state, and there was a pamphlet inside with a quote from the governor, Governor Cuomo. And in it, he said, a vote for this bond act would be the ultimate selfless act. And I said, wait, what's going on here? I said to Judy, she was in the kitchen. I said, here you have the government using my money to tell me how to vote. They weren't explicitly exhorting a yes vote, but they were basically trying to persuade me to vote yes on this, using my money to do it. There's got to be something wrong with that. And so back to the law library, and what I discovered in my research there was that any issue that's on the ballot, remember this, any issue that's on the ballot, whether it's somebody running for office, or whether it's this question from the state wanting our approval for them to borrow money, or whether it's your local school board asking for your approval, for money for an expansion project, whatever. Any issue on the ballot is a private matter until it passes. Only when it passes do we, the people, give up a little bit more of our power to the government to do whatever it is they're asking approval for. Well, this is important because in our state constitution it says, your state constitution probably says the same thing, no public money can be used in aid of a private undertaking. And so here they were using public money in aid of a private undertaking. This question on the ballot was a private undertaking. So that was my argument. So I prepared the papers, and of course now you're suing the state. You have to do it in Albany where the seat of power is. And so I went down to Albany to find out where these state Supreme Court justices hang out. And went to their county courthouse, and there was a directory. And there's a whole lot more state Supreme Court justices down there because of the high population. And there was Judge Lawrence Kahn, and he was up on the second floor, and I didn't want to walk up any more flights, so I went to his floor, his door, and went inside, and I had these papers. I had learned that there were 6 million more of these envelopes on the loading dock at the state environmental agency, ready to go out to homeowners all over the state, and I didn't want any more to go out. I wanted to sue the governor for using public money to sway the results of this election. I didn't know whether it was a good thing to give them the approval or not, but I knew there was a law, and that I knew it was wrong to use public funds in aid of a private undertaking. And so I had these papers to initiate the lawsuit, and there was a temporary restraining order in there to prevent the governor, or to prevent the state from sending these other 6 million envelopes out. So in any event, I walked into Judge Kahn's chambers, and there was Elaine, and I was walking to her desk, and on an inner hallway, this man was walking down, and I didn't know it was Judge Kahn, but that's who it was. And he said, "What do you got there?" See, you never know what's going to happen. You defend your rights, you defend your Constitution, you never know what's going to happen. You do the right thing, you never know what's going to happen. And here's what happened. I was nervous. I'm suing the governor now. I've gone up from my local, town and county, and now it's the governor. And so I had these papers. He said, "What have you got there?" And I said, "It's a show cause order." And he said, "Who's it against?" And I very sheepishly said, "It's the governor." And so he said, "What's he doing now?" You never know what's going to happen, right? And so I said, "Well, he's using my money to tell me how to vote on this question that's on the ballot coming up in November." So this was, if I write a book, this will be a moment that I will talk about. Our eyes met. And he was just looking at me, and you could almost smell the wood burning, right? And he said, "Government does that all the time, don't they?" They do. But nobody had ever challenged it before using this argument that we had created. So he said, "Use that phone and get the Attorney General down here." Whoa. So Elaine dialed the number, and of course there's 1,000 assistant attorney generals in the state. And so I told this fella who answered the phone, I said, "I'm down at Judge Kahn's chambers, and he would like someone to come down. I have a lawsuit here, against the governor, and there's a temporary restraining order involved in this." So he said, "Are you an attorney?" Oh, he said, "What's your name?" And I told him, but he never heard me. He said, "Well, are you an attorney?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, let me talk to the judge." So the Judge Kahn was just listening, and then Judge Kahn spoke, and he said, "Look, if if you're not down here in 45 seconds, I'm going to sign this. If you come down in 45 seconds, you can try and talk me out of it. And so, again, you never know what's going to happen. So the guy was there in 45 seconds, and the Judge Kahn listened to these. It's my motion, so I argue first, and then and I explained to the judge, I said, look, Judge, there's this arrived in the mail, and this is a quote from the governor, and it's really persuasive. And Judge, to prove it's persuasive, I went to the local college to a communications professor, and I asked him, is this persuasive communication? And he gave me an affidavit and says, yeah, it's persuasive communication. Judge, there's a provision of the Constitution that says, Pierre's never heard this before. Nobody ever heard this before. It's a new argument. So I said, there's a provision of the Constitution that says you can't use public money in aid of a private undertaking. Judge, this may not look like it, but this is because it's got the governor's name on it, and the legislature passed the proposition that's going on the ballot. It may look like a public undertaking, but, Your Honor, it's a private undertaking. There's case law that says anything, any issue on the ballot is private until it passes. So I argued that. Then poor Assistant Attorney General the lawyers can talk but not say anything. Well, he spoke. He had never heard this argument. He didn't know how to defend against this, but he spoke. And then the judge said, well, I agree with him, meaning me, and he signed the restraining order. And then the case was heard, and I prevailed, and the state appealed, and I prevailed without an attorney. This was after that first sewer case, I've done the research, I've written the briefs, and I've argued the cases in the courts. And so that really, wow, every newspaper in the state editorialized about, this person upstate, who's not an attorney, who is questioning, is confronting the government, and has prevailed on this issue. Not an insignificant issue, because it meant and the issue went down to defeat in November, but $1.9 billion was involved. And the people did not give the governor the authority to borrow that money, in large part because of all of this publicity that he was violating the state constitution in encouraging or persuading people to pass this. So in any event, with that, we started to hear from people all over the state, and Judy and I decided that winter that we would reserve the main courtroom in all these little county courthouses all over the state, and that we would just get the word out that we were going to be there if anybody wanted to come. We'd talk to them about vigilance. And we did that 42 times, 42 counties. And out of that came the All-County Taxpayers Association. So we collapsed this little Tri-County Taxpayers Association and formed the All-County Taxpayers Association, ACTA. And then we have, in New York, we have it's in our Constitution now that every 20 years, whether the governor, whether the legislature likes it or not, there will be a question on our ballot. Do we want a constitutional convention? We get to vote on that every 20 years. And so it was coming up in 1997. Well, I had between 1990 and 1997, I was bringing a lot of lawsuits against the state in defense of the, primarily in defense of the articles of the state and local government provisions of our state constitution regarding financing, raising money and spending, and setting a lot of important constitutional precedent, winning a lot of cases. Until we came along, no taxpayer could sue the state. We changed that, and a few other things. But so by 1997, we pretty much had an idea of what few words we would like to add to the state constitution here and there to make our ability to hold government accountable a whole lot easier. But the government didn't want, wasn't even telling anybody that this question was going on the ballot. They did not want us to know. And we decided, the genesis of the We the People Congress is this. In April of that year, we were holding, we put the word out, and people came from all over the state to Albany, and we sat in one of the hearing rooms. We reserved it on the first Monday of every month. And we talked about these issues that were facing the state, facing us as citizens, and our need to hold the government accountable. And we passed as a group resolutions. And these resolutions said that if the people approve the Constitutional Convention question, which we were in favor of, it works altogether different than a federal convention, but if the people approved it, then these issues would be given to the delegates at the Constitutional Convention. So that's what we did in 1997. But in the last couple of weeks before the vote in November, the public employee unions and the trial lawyers and others teamed together, put a huge fund together, and for a week before the election, they had all the black and white television ads, and the thing went down to defeat. But that taught me that the government has power, organization, and money, and that the people need power, organization, and money if we're going to be able to stand up and prevail against the government. That was a very intensive year, and we were just knocked right out of the box. We didn't have the power, the organization, and the money to convince enough people in the state about the need for change. And so we formed. I went down to Washington following that defeat in early November of 1997. So I went to Washington and met with and talked to the attorneys at the Institute for Justice, the Center for Individual Rights, all of these constitutionally, freedom-oriented think tanks in Washington, D.C., to see how they are structured, to see how they go about doing their work, and came up with this model, the We the People Foundation, as a research and educational 501c3 organization, and the We the People Congress as the civic action. So one is civic education, not membership, the We the People Foundation, and the We the People Congress is civic action, and it's a membership organization. That's how a lot of these, even the League of Women Voters is structured along those lines. So we adopted that, and in 1997 we incorporated pretty much as a New York State foundation and Congress with 19-member board, all New Yorkers. But we amended that a few years later as we found ourselves so heavily involved in some of the federal issues. That was in 1997. So long and short of it is, between 1979 and 2007, if you put my name in LexisNexis, you will find, where's my, there we go. You'll find, as I did the other day, at least 109 reported decisions in cases that I have brought against the government, and these are those cases. I don't have to go through them all, but all of this will be on this PowerPoint presentation available to anyone that's interested. You can see these cases. We won a lot of very significant cases. Twice got the governor. He didn't learn the first time. Got him twice for using public funds to sway the results of an election. In 1992, I received a telephone call of somebody who went on to be a congressman, but I didn't know him at the time. But he said, you know that case you won against the governor for using public funds to sway the results of that election back in 1990? Well, he's at it again. What's he doing? I asked. And he said he's used the Commerce Department to print 50,000 copies of a flyer, and he's distributing it in the Hispanic community of New York City to influence the outcome of the Bush 1 Clinton vote. And I said, well, send me a copy of the flyer. And I looked at it and I said, sure enough, this goes way beyond the line here. This isn't just education. This is advocacy, and he's using public funds. So that case, again, went all the way to the High Court in New York State, and the two lower courts, they started circling the wagon, the Democrats and the judges. And so I lost, we lost at the lowest level and the mid level. I said, wait a minute, we set the precedent in the other case. How could you lose this? So we asked the High Court to hear it. They did, and they reversed the two lower courts, and we prevailed on that issue. But in any event, 109 decisions, setting a lot of important, it's a lot easier for independents to access the ballot now because of a couple of cases we won. Anyway, we go through those in some detail if you like. But any event, in defense of the federal Constitution, this all began in 1994. Howard Stern was the Libertarian Party. God love them. There were all these intellectuals, and all they seem to do is run people for office at every level. And they're really intellectuals. In any event, they're a club in New York State, and they've been trying to get major party status for decades. Well, to become a major party in New York, you have to get 50,000 votes for a governor in any 1 year. Then you become one of the big boys. And you don't have to circulate petitions anymore. You can just designate your candidates and so forth. So the Libertarians in 1994, 93, they had decided, well, we're going to get 50,000 votes for governor because our choice for governor is going to be Howard Stern. And he's got a lot of followers, you know. So Howard Stern was their, candidate. I don't know any, you know, I didn't know any of this. I wasn't paying attention. I don't pay attention to things, you know, political. But in any event, it turns out Howard Stern had only a couple of planks in his platform. He said, if I'm elected, we're going to get rid of all the tolls. We have a New York State Thruway is a toll road. And he also said, if I'm elected, there won't be any more work done on highways during the day. It'll all be done at night. Well, everybody cheered. It was a great platform. But then the day came when Howard Stern had to comply with the law and had to disclose his finances. So he said, that's it, I'm out of here. And he just left the Libertarians hanging. He just, in August or so, he just quit. So the Libertarians said, Bob, would you be our candidate? You know, we need somebody on the ballot. I said, no, I'm not interested. I think people have to, we have a problem in this country. We couch everything in political terms. That's a problem. Our solution to our problems are not one more than half the number of people voting, which is what politics is all about. We need people to band together and just, regardless of people's political stripes, we've got to hold their feet to the fire and defend the Constitution. So that's what I do. And he said, well, we do have a problem here, Bob, with the election law. And I said, what's that? And he said, it's very hard for independents to access the ballot. The two major parties have written the election law. And they've written it in such a way that you really can't get on the ballot as an independent. So I said, that doesn't sound right. They knew what buttons to push, right? So I said, that doesn't sound right. So I said, okay, we'll do this. My understanding is you've got to get 15,000 valid signatures from registered voters saying, you know, you'd like Bob Schulz to be on the ballot. And I said, I'm not going to spend a nickel. I'm not going to ask anybody to vote for me, but I'll watch all you guys running around the state getting these petitions. And then the day will probably come. If you're right, the day is going to come when the state's going to write me a letter, or you guys, and you can say, sorry, you're off, you know, you didn't make it because of one Byzantine or nonsensical rule or another that the major parties have written. And so I watched them as they were running around getting these petitions signed. And I saw what the problems were. And eventually I got the letter. They had turned in some 17,500 signatures. The Republican Party challenged it and said these, you know, 5,000 signatures are invalid, you know, for this reason or that reason. And therefore, he fell short. The Libertarians fell short of the required 15,000 signatures. Anyway, so with that, I had standing. I'm now injured. I'm an injured party, and because I'm a candidate, and so I put together a state and a federal lawsuit, and I won them both. And it's now, we struck down a section of the election law which was being used to make it hard for people to get on the ballot. We struck that down, and also it was a great decision. It's one of the proudest decisions I'm proud of, because the state case, I won't go into all the detail, but I'd love to talk about it, but there isn't time today. But in that case, here's the outcome of the state case. Prior to this lawsuit, if somebody wanted the voter registration list from Suffolk County would charge them $2,500. And if you wanted it from Rensselaer County, they would charge you $460, and it went up that way all over the state. Today, in my county, I've done it, you can just attest it. You could go to the county and you could say, I want the voter registration list for the 45 or 50,000 voters in my county. And the clerk on the other side of the counter takes her 20 seconds to make a copy, and she hands it to you on a computer-readable material, a disk. And you say, how much? And they say, take it. It cost us more to process an invoice for that than it's worth, so take it. So today, you can get access to the statewide voter registration list. I asked the court, I said, this should cost no more than the cost of the computer-readable material, and I put in my brief, and the momentary amount of time it takes to press a button to transfer as far as the labor cost. The momentary amount of time it takes to press a button to, louder? My wife says, okay. Okay, sorry. Okay. Who can't hear? Is there somebody out in the hallway?
People in the hallway.
Oh, for heaven's sakes, come on up here.
There's room over here.
Come on up. Oh, no, come on in here. Sit on the table or something. Come on in here.
Now look what you did.
Now, we're not going to go any further. We're not going to go any further till you come in here. Come on.
I'll drag your butts in.
Come on.
Let's go.
Go get them.
Come on. Go trouble.
Oh, no, really. I don't know who's out there. All right. So we'll continue. Well, there's no mic. Sorry. Come on up here. And come on up here as well. I mean, you can sit on this counter here, or...
Mark. Mark. Zoom in front, folks.
Okay, so the long and short of that is the judge put that in his decision that this material these voter registration lists have to be made available at no more than the cost of the material and the momentary amount of time it takes to press a button. So that was great. Anyway, that was the first, and that case went all the way to the Second Circuit, and we prevailed, and I was on the ballot for the Libertarian line for governor that year. And all I did was debate the governor along with other candidates a couple of times on public television. But other than that, my primary purpose was in defense of people's right, defense of the state constitution and people's right to equal protection of the law. I mean, the law was treating the major parties differently than it was treating people in the minor parties. And we prevailed. Anyway, 1995, my defense of, or our defense of the federal Constitution continued. I was reading the New York Times, and there was a story unfolding, a fascinating story. So you could read the paper, and you could read about these things, and what you need to do, or what I found myself doing, was putting what I was reading and the stories I was hearing day by day into a context, into the context of the federal and state constitutions, and seeing how they, might, if there's a conflict there, and if there is, it was your responsibility to confront it. Simply stated, no matter what, it's our duty to watch what government is saying and doing and compare their behavior with the requirements of your constitutions. And if there's an impropriety or a conflict, it is our duty to confront it. So here I am reading the Times. Now, let's go back in time to 1995. What was going on in the world? You had, first of all, in Mexico, they have a presidential cycle every 6 years. And it is cyclical. A couple of years before the election, the government puts a lot more money into society, get people feeling a little bit better about things to maybe re-elect these guys. And so they had an election, but after the elections, it's cyclical. After the election, they have to devalue the peso because they got too many of them out there. And it goes on all like clockwork, right? So here we have 1995, there's a new president, and they're devaluing the peso because they had put too many out there. And somebody made the decision to let it drop and let it find its own level. Well, it kept dropping. And also in 1995, the administration was Governor Bill Clinton and President Clinton, and the Secretary of the Treasury was Robert Rubin. Robert Rubin had come from Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs had been marketing about 100% of Mexican treasuries, Mexican bonds, securities. And it was right after NAFTA.